everyone, and thank you for joining us today. We're going to wait just a few minutes so that everybody has a chance to join before we get started. So just hang tight for a minute or two, and we will be back to start the lab. All right, hello everybody and welcome. Thanks for joining us today for our IBM webMethods API Management hands-on lab. Before we get started, I'm going to run through just a few housekeeping items. On the right hand of your screen, you're going to see a few tabs. You can use the chat tab if you have any comments during the session, but if you have specific questions, we ask that you submit it through the Q&A so that we're able to have an expert answer it. If you submit it through the chat, we'll likely move it over to the Q&A and answer it there. Under the Documents tab, you'll find a few things. First is the hands-on lab guide. I suggest going ahead and downloading/opening it now, so you're able to follow along step by step through the lab. You'll also find the slides that Scott will be sharing here in a moment. And lastly, you'll find a materials link that has some files that you'll need during the lab, so that will be a handy one to have open as well. All right, now to kick this off, I will go ahead and introduce you to Scott, our Senior Solutions Architect for webMethods.
All right, thanks a lot, Emma. So I'm just on here for a moment with the video, but I've been told I'm having some bandwidth issues. So in a moment, I'll turn off my video just to make sure everybody hears me okay. But can everybody hear me fine? If you could just put like a thumbs up in the chat or anything. Awesome, thank you. All right, so let me do this. Let me go ahead and turn off my camera, and I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my, let's see here. My apologies. I've forgotten since the last time where to share my screen from. Oh, there we go. All right. If everyone can let me know, are you able to see my my screen now? So hopefully everybody can see that okay. So again, as Emma said, hello everybody. My name is Scott Womack. I'd like to welcome you to our hands-on lab. The first thing I want to do is just for those that haven't already, please take this time during my overview to make sure you're properly logged into the webMethods cloud. If you have any issues, please post those in the chat for assistance. So today, we're going to get you as much hands-on time with our API management solution as possible. But before we get to that, I wanted to touch on where our API management solution fits within the rest of our products and our platform. And I also wanted to go over what you're going to be doing today in the lab. So before we dive into that part of the presentation, I just want to take a moment to introduce our team. So each member brings unique expertise and experience to the table. And together we're dedicated to delivering the best insights and solutions for you today. So this is the team that will be assisting you. This is our agenda
Hey, Scott,
for the day.
we're actually still seeing the first slide.
All right. Is it switching over yet at all? It should be the introduction slide.
All right, now it is showing introductions for the team.
Okay. So it must be just a little delayed. Apparently I'm having some bandwidth issues. If this continues, let me know and I will switch over to the PDFs. All right. So hopefully now, and give it a second to resolve up there, but you should be seeing our agenda for today. So basically we're going to just step through the pieces of our API management platform. Then I'm going to pass it over to Xiaolei Chu, who is another solution architect like myself, who's going to guide you through the lab. So we should have some time at the end for questions, but I'll also continue if you have any issues or questions. You can put those into the chat as part of the platform here. And then we'll kind of wrap everything up at the end. One thing that I do recommend, and I've seen folks have best experience with, is that for the live part of this session, you can just listen and follow along. I certainly follow along with us as you can, but I really want you to be able to take away from this session is the ability to really go through all the aspects of this. So if you do feel like you're getting a little too far behind, just go ahead and stop and listen as we go. Keep in mind, this is going to be recorded, so you'll have access to that as well, so that you'll be able to come at a later date and go through these things step by step in your own time. But feel free to follow along if you like and ask questions. We want this to be an open conversation, and put those in the chat if you will. So from that standpoint, let me begin. What you should be seeing in front of you now is just a representation of our platform. And what I wanted to do is just talk a little bit of an overview from that standpoint. So
Hey,
at
Scott,
webMethods,
I think
yeah.
I think the lag is, I think it's pretty severe. It just switched to the next slide actually, so maybe it will be okay. We can keep trying if you want.
No, it's telling me I've got an error sharing the screen for some reason. So I'm gonna stop sharing that and see if how do you share the slides directly from the deck?
Just go to the slides tab and then share whichever slide you'd like.
All right.
Sorry, everybody, for the technical difficulties. Thank you for bearing with us.
It is not letting me share.
I believe it's because you were still screen sharing. If you click on your screen and then stop sharing, then you'll be able to share the slide. So I can put up slide 4 right now, and you can just continue on.
Okay, I think I got it going right here. Again, apologize, folks. So on this first one, as we're stepping through, this is just kind of a brief overview of the platform. What we want out of webMethods is for our iPaaS solution to allow you to create, really incredibly connected customer experiences, employee engagements, B2B interactions, while minimizing the disruption. So you get end-to-end visibility and governance across geographies, across your IT environments and complex business ecosystems. So with connectivity from on-prem to the cloud, as well as enterprise-grade security trusted by the most powerful banks, governments, corporations around the world. So really our goal here is to help you stop drowning in digital transformation and empower you to begin innovating. So on this next slide, what we're going to do is just talk about the idea that webMethods gives you centralized control, distributed execution, and the flexibility to scale up and down as needed. And this is the aspect of cloud that we find most important for you. So the next thing I wanted to jump to is, we want to kind of tighten our focus with an overview specifically of the API management solution. So from that standpoint, all right. So what you're going to be seeing today is part of the webMethods iPaaS platform. So webMethods iPaaS is a single location to service all your integration needs, which is going to include, B2B integration, managed file transfer, API management, any types of integration patterns. Additionally, on top of our iPaaS, we do offer tools like stream sets for data pipelines and data analytics. But ultimately, the goal here is to give you a single location where you can manage all the different types of integrations and integration patterns that you need to work with. Now, as mentioned earlier, we're going to be focusing specifically on the webMethods API Management platform, which are two parts of our webMethods cloud. So first, there is the developer portal. This is your API ecosystem where all your internal and external consumers are going to be able to come and find APIs. They're going to be able to subscribe to them, try them out. The APIs they're looking for can be APIs that are running in your own API gateway or APIs that are running in any of the different API gateways you may work with within your organization. They could come from an API marketplace that you may be working with. So this is really just a storefront where you can bring in APIs from anywhere and control access, monitor them, get analytics on what kind of activity happened against them. And then the second piece is our API gateway. We're going to spend most of our time today in that. This is our layer of abstraction where APIs are actually executed. The goal here really is to help you manage that sprawl of APIs as they continue to expand with the ability to secure, execute, analyze these APIs. Here you can take APIs both internal and external and create consistent authentication and policies and control traffic and block threats and much more from that standpoint as well. So this is just a look at the API gateway interface. So what this allows you to do is take an API that you've created. This could be within our integration part of our platform, or it could be an API from your partners or that you created previously from legacy work or API marketplaces. You can bring those and import those in into a common, apply a common level of security. You can manage them, monitor activity as it goes through, and govern all the different pieces. This is where we create policies as it goes through the lifecycle of the API. And this is where you can manage that part of the process. The other part we're going to be looking at is the API portal. So the API portal is where you can take an API, again, as we mentioned earlier, from a gateway, from our gateway, as well as other gateways, other APIs, and provide the ability for people to come and find those. So you can search and browse through the entire catalog of the APIs to find specifically what you're looking for. And once you found it, you're going to be able to get information on what does that API look like? What are the operations and resources that are available within it? And you can subscribe to the API so that you can use it. You can also try out and make sure that the information that you get back from that API is what you expected to get back. There's also a layer of collaboration so that as you're moving into the implementation phase of a project, you can reach out directly to other users of the API or maybe even the developers themselves of the API and ask questions. This makes sure that you're going to be able to get information like best practices for that specific API, maybe implementation guides. You can ask questions about how things are done. maybe make requests for new APIs or extensions or new versions of the existing API. All right. Now, from a real world perspective, this is an example of what we've done for one of our customers using our iPaaS platform, utilizing obviously integration, but also API management. So it utilizes both. Many of you may have been on last week's integration hands-on lab. So this kind of combines both of them, what this customer is doing. This transportation and logistics company has more than 500,000 employees. They deliver over 25 million packages daily. And their focus has been to make its distribution centers smarter and more efficient by leveraging automation. So the outcome of this was for them to minimize business disruption and enhance their customer experience. So to do this, this company utilizes webMethods integration platform, both combination of on-premise and in the cloud, so a hybrid approach, as well as our API gateway to expose functionality from maybe different backend systems to their customers, purchasing warehouse management services. So this has definitely reduced new customer onboarding time. It used to take them about 2 weeks to onboard customers. Now it's down to about 2 days. The infrastructure they put in place is also scalable and reusable, enabling them to maintain uptime and reduce costs by leveraging automation. They were able to establish a new revenue stream for freight forwarding by exposing some of these APIs and backend systems to third parties and their customers, things of that nature. So looking forward, they fully expect their transaction volumes to increase tenfold, and they're going to be able to leverage the existing infrastructure built on webMethods integration and API management to support that. All right, so what are we going to be showing you today? Let's kind of touch on that a little bit. So in kind of keeping with our customer example, kind of following along the one we just talked about, we're going to make this lab a little bit more real world. So what we want to try to imagine today is what we're doing is we're working for a trucking or logistics company, and we'll just call it ABC Logistics. Some of your API needs in doing this job might include giving your field people, maybe your truck drivers or your field personnel, access to the data in your internal systems, such as adding or updating customer information. This might allow them to be more efficient and react faster to issues. You might have an initiative whereby you wanted to make some of the company's data available to third-party vendors or customers for use in their own online applications. This is going to allow you to maybe create some new revenue streams or grow your business. Or maybe you have a request from many of your top customers to get access to real-time tracking of their shipments. Now, in today's lab, we're going to touch on the first of these cases, but our API gateway and portal would allow you to handle any one of those moving forward. It's kind of exactly what it's meant to do. This one, and I usually have a build out of this slide, and I apologize for this, and I'll try to talk you through it as much as possible. But basically, this is a representation of the use cases that I just spoke about. So on the left-hand side, what we're going to be doing in our primary use case today is we have a CRM on the back end. In this case, it'd be Salesforce. And what we want to do is we have created a customized API accessing Salesforce, and we want to expose that to our customers out there. So you'll see the blue line coming in. We're going to import and that API into the gateway that we created, and then we're going to apply some different policies to it, some security, different things around that, just showing you how we can use the gateway to manage that API. Then we're going to expose that API into the developer portal, which you see above the firewall there. And then that will then be able to be used by, in this case, the truck driver or any of the other field personnel. You'll be able to access that API with their handheld apps or what have you, and be able to get access to that data. One of the other things that's in our use case or in our documentation is how to mock up an API, because you may have customers that you may be working on an API, but it's not ready yet, but you don't want to be a bottleneck for other people who will be using that. That may be internal developers, it might be external customers. So in this case, we've got like a representation of a database. We're not ready with the API for that yet. So in your guide, there'll be a way to walk through that process to show you how to mock up an API so that developers can go ahead and start developing from their side of how they would use that API. And then finally, just as an aside, you can bring in any third-party APIs and bring them into your gateway and expose them maybe to your internal employees or developers or whoever, but you can manage it and control it all through this one central part right here. So, with that, I wanted to stop sharing, and I'm going to pass this on to Xiaolei Chu, who's going to allow you guys to get in there and really start getting your hands on the product. Before I do that, I did want to take a few moments so that if you are participating along with us, we just want to, again, make sure that everybody was able to log in. If you have any issues with that, please put that in the chat, and our support people will jump on there and help you resolve that issue. Probably get moved over to Q&A where they'll answer it there, but go ahead and put any questions or issues in the chat. So, Xiaolei, let me stop sharing and hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Scott. So we'll just give everyone a few moments to log in and make sure that you download the lab guide and download the customer JSON file, which you can find under the docs section in the hands-on lab materials. So please let us know if you need any help with logging into the pre-sales test tenant. And this is where everyone should start. I'm really excited to starting the lab with you guys. So once you are all set and ready, just send an emoji so I know that everyone is ready. All right, I see you guys are ready to get started. So thank you, Scott, for the overview of IBM webMethods API Management and the value that it brings. My name is Xiaolei, and I will be leading the hands-on portion of this lab. So I'll guide you step by step so you can follow along, or you can just watch and absorb and just listen to the recording later and follow the steps of the lab. So we're going to take the scenario that Scott went over, where we're ABC trucking logistics, and we want to give field personnel or the drivers some logistics data. What we're going to do is we'll be using the customer API and see how IBM webMethods API Gateway can protect the existing API and how it can be made accessible to consumers in the developer portal. So I'm starting here at the IBM webMethods iPass. Make sure that you open new tabs for the API Gateway and the developer portal. So have those open and have the customer API JSON file open, and also open up a notepad, because we'll be copy and pasting some information that we'll be needing throughout the lab. All right. So once you have that, what you see in the screen here is the IBM iPass. And this is the single platform for all of your integration needs. You guys may not see some of these tabs like B2B or integrations, because this lab is just focused on API management, but just know that all of these are available to you. So the IBM iPass offers a common cloud platform services such as identity, tenant, and environment management. It's scalable, so you can grow at your own pace, and there are flexible deployment options. It is a single, easy-to-use platform, and you can easily switch to the applications that you need with using the application switcher. So we are going to go over the API gateway. So to look at the overview of the API gateway, we have the APIs where you can see the list of all the APIs that are in the gateway. You can filter it by different statuses. And in the policies section, you have the overview to manage all of the policies at the API gateway level.
So let me just jump in too, just point out, and we'll touch on this a little bit later on as Jale goes through each of these. You have kind of a larger view of things up here. Anything in the blue banner, APIs, policies, applications, packages, micro gateways, are at the whole gateway approach to things. However, you will be spending a lot of time dealing with policies on an individual API basis, and you'll see those later on when we get into the APIs.
And applications, this is where you associate the applications with the APIs and create a consumer for the API gateway. So we'll see that later in the lab, where this is how the API gateway can identify or authenticate applications that are requesting an API.
These are basically built the equivalent of our consumers. So all the applications, this is how you can, as Jale said, you can control how you want the interaction to happen with the API, and it may be different for different groups. So this is a way you can deal with that aspect.
And packages is if you are creating a monetization strategy for your APIs, you can create packages for your third-party users to subscribe to.
This is really where, if you're exposing the APIs to outside users or maybe specific groups within, if you're a shared service and you're exposing to different groups within companies, this is where you can set up, the SLA for different customers. You can set up, how many calls they're allowed to make, what APIs are associated with the packages. The plans are where you can set up more detailed information around, how many calls per month and things of that nature. But it's all manage all that through here as well.
And finally, with the microservices, when you have a collection of services that are loosely coupled and independently deployable, this is where you can have rapid and frequent and reliable delivery of your large and complex applications. Yep. So now that we have the overview of the API gateway, just want to briefly go over the overview of the API level before getting started. So at the API level, you have the API details, and this is where you manage everything along with the basic information of that API, where you specify fields such as name, version, team. It's going to allow you to easily identify and categorize your APIs. With the technical information, this is where you specify the server URLs, and it automatically creates documentations that you can later download and use. We also have resources and methods where we will see more of that later. And of course, API mocking, this is where if some of your APIs are not ready for production, you can use this to simulate an API that is working. That is, yeah.
So once in a moment, we're going to walk through, scopes and policies and things. But in a moment, when you import the Swagger file and create the API, you'll see how by doing that, it's going to populate all of this for you from that standpoint. And we'll go into detail if you don't have a Swagger or whatever, how that would be handled. But that's basically what you're going to see when you import that.
Thank you, Scott. And now with the overview of the gateway and API, let's get started with the first step of the lab. So if you're going along with the lab guide, we are on page 7. Here, we are going to create an application. So we talked about applications earlier, and this is going to be the consumer for API Gateway. To do this, we're going to click Create Applications. And you're going to create a name for your app. You can use your initials and then the number that is associated to your hands-on username _app. Once you've created your application name, make sure that you copy and paste the name in your notepad because we'll be referring to this later. And for your team associated with the hands-on user name that you have, so if you're hands-on user 10, add that to your team. And just have a brief description for your application. Now go to the Identifiers tab and scroll down to Other Identifiers, and you're going to select Username. So this is going to be the username that you use to log into the tenant.
So these identifiers, just to kind of jump in here, Jale is just putting in one username. So you can set up an application. This is basically defining who is identified as part of this application as a consumer. You could do individual users. You could do different groups. You could do it by header key and value. You can do it by IP addresses. So a lot of different ways you can set up how you want to define who your consumers are. So you can see all there within that environment, a lot of different ways to set up the identifiers. And again, this just lets you group together different users and consumers under a single kind of consumer application.
So again, make sure you've copied and pasted your application name onto a separate notepad. And then for the identifiers, make sure you've added your username and click Add so that it's added here. And we're going to save. And so in just a few steps, we created a consumer for the API Gateway so that it can identify and authenticate, which this is going to ensure the API access is limited to authorized and authenticated consumers. So now we are going to the API Gateways tab. For this step, make sure you've downloaded the customer API JSON file, which is located in the Docs tab on Goldcast in the Hands-on Lab material. So here we're going to import and assign the API, and so that only your team has access to it. So to do so, we're going to click Create API. And for this, we're importing the API from file, and we're going to browse and import the customer_API.json file. And for the name, you can use your initials and the number associated with your hands-on user name underscore customer API. And for the type, we're selecting Swagger. Version is going to be 1.0. Can a brief description for this API. And then add the team that is associated with your username.
So one thing I wanted to point out as we're stepping through here, and it got brought up in the chat, is as Jale is typing in some of these, you'll see like it kind of show up selections in the bottom there. That's just because we've done this so many times. There's some different ones available to us, but like when you're typing in your username, if it doesn't show up, just start manually typing it in, and then you'll start seeing a listing that matches that pop up down there for you. Hopefully that should work, but I know Jiva was having some issues with that. But one of the things I wanted to point out here as well, we brought this in as a Swagger file, but as if you select the drop down there, you saw that we do support OpenAPI, RAML, obviously for SOAP, there's WSDL files. For GraphQL, there's GraphQL SDL files. So whatever type of API it is, we can bring that in. If you don't have a file, some apps will just give you a URL that has that information on it. You can click on the second one there and import directly from that. That's if it's in a Swagger or OpenAPI or something type format. Ultimately, if you don't have any of those, and quite frankly, a lot of apps don't, you can create it from scratch. Just keep in mind too that any of the APIs created in our integration platform, for those of you who were on Integration Hands-on Lab last week, we automatically generate a Swagger file definition from that, so or WSDL or whatever is appropriate for whatever style it is. So that way it's automatically created for you.
So make sure you have your customer API name using your initial and the number associated with your hands-on user. The type is selected as Swagger 1.0 version. You have a brief description of the API, and you've added your hands-on user name as your team. And we're going to click Create. And so you've successfully imported and assigned the API, so only your team has access to edit. Now we are going to go through the resources and methods, and this is where we will edit so that we can show some elements to prompt the developers who are seeing or using this API so that they know what to expect when using this API. And we'll see that when we publish this API to the developer portal. And if you're following along in the lab guide, we are going to go to page 10 on the lab guide. So now we're going to go to the edit mode, and under API details, we're going to go to resources and methods. And we are going to edit create and update. So first click on create, and we're going to scroll down to body_4 right here. And we're going to click on the pencil icon. So here you can see that you can add some sample to this. So refer to the lab guide on page 11 because you're going to copy and paste this sample. And so when this API gets published to the developer portal, they can be prompted to create a customer name so that they don't just get a blank text when trying this API. And we'll see what I mean later. So
Yeah,
once you have...
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, when you get to the point where we're using these on the developer portal, by default, it's going to put, name out there. But if you don't put anything else, it'll just put for the text jumbles of letters, just to show where you would fill that in. And this is for posts or patching, anything that's where you're using the body part of a request to fill that out. So what she's doing here is enabling you to make it a little bit more straightforward for that person. So in here, it says name. Well, let's explain what we mean by name. And then in the other one that Jaleh will go through, there'll be a lot of different things, street, city, whatever, and one will be ID. Well, what ID is that? You want that user to know, oh, well, it's going to be their Salesforce ID that got created earlier. So this is just where you can make it really clear for the end user what's expected in that element.
Okay, so once you've copied and pasted the sample, click check to save that. And we're going to scroll down to update. And go to the schema called body. And click on the pencil icon. And then refer to page 12 of the lab guide. And we're going to copy that sample right there. It has city, county, state, street. So once you have that as well, we're going to click check. So we've updated create and update. And click save to save everything. So now that we've edited some of the resources and methods to help the developers or users who are going to be trying out the API, we're going to create some policies. So we're going to go to the Policies tab and click Edit. So in the Policies tab, here you see a visual of all the policies enforced on the API. The blue arrows show the different security policies that the request has to go through before it hits your application. And the response is the green line going through the policies before a requester receives response. So the API gateway is very visual, and you don't have to hard code the policies, and we'll see throughout the steps how easy it is to quickly secure your APIs. So again, make sure you're on edit mode, and it will automatically take you to transport. And we are going to unclick HTTP and click on HTTPS. And on the left side of the policy map, we're going to go to Identify and Access. And then under the Policy tab, you're going to add Identify and Authorize. For here, make sure that the condition type is OR, and click Allow Anonymous. And we're going to click HTTP Basic Authentication for the identification type. And for the application lookup condition, we're going to choose Global Applications and Default Application.
And just as we're stepping through this, just to reiterate, I know Emma put it in the chat, but if you're at a place where you still can't find your team, just use the generic hands-on lab -team one for your team. But just to kind of back up what Jale was walking through here, the idea here is now we're both allowing anonymous and putting HTTP basic authentication here. Normally you would not allow anonymous and then just leave the basics, but we're going to allow you to do both and kind of try it out, see what it's like. But we all have, as you can see here, all different sorts of authentication types here. So all the main ones that you would support you would need to be able to support. We do support through here. So it does make it, very robust in terms of applying a consistent authorization and authentication across all of your APIs.
So again, make sure condition type is or allowing anonymous. Clicked HTTP basic authentication under the identification type. And for the application lookup condition, you've selected global applications and default applications. And we are going to click Save. So let's go back to the edit mode and scroll down to routing. Here we're going to add outbound auth transport. And so you'll see the properties here for this policy. We're going to leave it as basic, and we're going to authenticate using custom credentials. And for the credentials, we're going to refer to the lab guide on page 14. Make sure you don't have any spaces before or after. And the username and password, they're case sensitive. So just check real quick that it's correct.
So the idea behind this, what we're doing right here in the real world example is, let's say in this case, what we have is this is the username and password to utilize the underlying API that we've imported. But we don't want to expose that to all of our users. We want them to have access to it, and we'll authenticate at the gateway level their login, but we'll allow them to use this kind of generic login on the back end. And that's, maybe you're in a situation where you need to be able to do that. This is what allows for that, but the end users would never see the custom credentials here.
So as you're editing, make sure you've copied and pasted correctly the username as user test, password test pass 1 exclamation point is a capital T. And click Save. And so we've protected this API with outbound authentication at the transport level. And so the developers can be able to easily try out the APIs. So now we're going to activate and publish this developer portal. To do so, simply just click Activate. And then, yes, you want to activate. And we're going to click Publish. So just make sure the destination is API portal. You have the API endpoints and the specific community, and we're going to publish. So you've successfully published your API. So now let's find it. You can just save this API name. So to do so, we're going to open up Developer Portal. And here you can see in the API gallery all the different APIs. You can use the app switcher to go to the developer portal as well. And I'm going to use the search bar to look for my specific API. And once you've found your API, we're going to click Try API. So for this one, we're just going to go to Query and just click on a simple send. And voila, you can see that you've successfully published your API to the developer portal and see some of the data here. So we're going to go back to the API gateway to apply more policies. This one is we're going to add some scopes.
Charlie, real quick, can you, one of our people is stuck on something I just wanted to show. Go ahead and edit mode.
Yes.
And go to the front end authentication, which we put on for basic, as well as, yeah, if you scroll down, not that one, the front end authentication.
This one?
There we go. Yeah, if you scroll down, just letting people know that we're asking, that's where you would select, just below where you select HTTP basic authentication, you'll see this lookup condition. That's where you put global applications and default applications. Hopefully that answers that question for you. Sorry about that, Jolly. Go ahead.
Oh, no worries. So this is in the identify and access for those who are in that step. Okay. Let's give a moment for everyone to just catch up.
Let us know too, yeah, is this a good pace for everybody? If it is, just give us a little thumbs up. Keeping in mind, just to reiterate, you will get access to a recording after this. So if you do get a little lost, don't worry. You're going to be able to get the recording, which you can then control, stop, pause, go through each step on your own. So don't worry about that. You're going to be able to do it.
So if you're following along the lab guide document, we're on page 17. We're going to create some scopes. So click on the Scopes tab and then go to Edit mode. So with scopes, this is where we want to be specific about the resources that the consumers access. We're going to add 3 different scopes. This first one is going to be Get All. So edit the name to Get All, and then scroll down and we're going to click Query and add that resource to the scope. Now we're going to add another scope called Get Single. And for that, we're scrolling down to Query by Name and adding that resource to the scope. And the last scope is Update. And for that, we're going to scroll down and click Update.
So the idea here is there may be specific policies that you only want to be applied when certain types of queries are happening. And it'll make more sense as we go through this, but that's the idea here is you can limit the scope of a policy to only specific scenarios if you want to.
And just making sure that everyone's following along with this first scope. The name is Get All, and we're clicking Query for this scope. For the Get Single scope, it's going to be Query by Name. And for Update, it's going to be Update. Okay, So now that we have that, we're going to save, and we're going to Policies tab. So we're going to apply some caching so that this API is not changing rapidly and accessed the same way. To do so, we're going to go to Edit mode and make sure that for the select scope, we are selecting Get All. So this is very important. Make sure that you're on this Get All scope. And we're going to go to Traffic Monitoring and add Service Results Cache. So now we're going to edit time to live and the maximum response payload size. We're going to enter 1M for 1 minute and 10,000.
So what we're doing here is, obviously, for those of you who work with APIs, understand that if you get a lot of the same calls, you don't want to have to keep having the API go back and do the whole process over and over again if you get these similar calls within a certain time period. So what we're doing here is caching those responses for better performance of the API. And what we're doing here is saying we want the cache to, when you make a call, that cache is going to live in memory for about a minute. And otherwise, after that, it'll drop off. Obviously, we don't want to keep having that grow and grow and grow. It could be bad. So the idea here too is, if you make couple different calls, the same calls the next couple times within that minute time period, it's going to come back much faster. Also, in terms of the payload size, if it's larger than what we've defined here, maybe it's a really large one, we don't want to put that in memory. Anything larger than our maximum response payload size is just going to make a normal call. It will only cache those that are under that maximum response payload size.
So again, make sure that the scope we're on Get All, and you've added under Traffic Monitoring, Service Results Cache, 1M for 1 minute and 10,000. And we're going to click Save and test that out in our developer portal. For here, we're going to request for query again, and we're going to send once. You can see the time it's going to be more than 10,000 milliseconds. As we send again, you can see that the response time should be a lot faster because the policy has been applied. Okay, so now we're going to move on to rate limiting policy. And this is where we're going to limit how many calls that consumers can make. To do so, we're going to edit mode again. And for the select scope, we are choosing Get Single. And we're going to go to Traffic Monitoring and add Traffic Optimization. For the value, we're going to enter 3. And then for the consumer application, we're going to type all and add all consumers. And then scroll down to alert interval, and we're going to enter 2. For unit, we're going to leave it as minutes. And under the alert message, you can type in your own alert message or just copy and paste from the lab guide. On page 22, you have exceeded your limits.
So basically what we're trying to do here is just, and there's a couple different ways you can do this within the gateway, but what we're doing here is just rate limiting. If someone's trying to make too many calls in a very short period of time, we can notify them. We can also, there's different ways to set it up. You can send emails or whatever to admins. There's, a lot of different responses that you can have. You can log it, but there's, a lot of different ways you can then record or get notifications if someone's doing that. And it keeps popping up a lot.
So again, make sure that you are on get single scope and you've added the traffic optimization policy, and the value you've entered 3, all consumers for the consumer applications, and then 2 minutes. And for alert interval, we're gonna do every time. And the alert message is you have exceeded your limits. And we're gonna click save and see how that is applied in the developer portal. Before we do that, we're going to create and post. And here we will create our own customer. So to do so, we're going to go to request body, and you can see the prompt. This is where we edited the resources and methods, and super helpful. So we're going to create your own customer name. It can be any name you want. I'm just going to do John Smith, but make sure you've copied and pasted your name so we can refer to that later. So copy and paste that customer name and save it into your notepad. We're going to click send. Here you should get a result with a Salesforce ID. Make sure you also copy and paste that. We'll need it for later steps. Okay. So now that you've created your customer name and you've saved the customer name and the customer Salesforce ID, we're going to go to query by name. And in the parameters, in the value, we're going to enter the customer name. And click send. Okay, so now if you click send a couple more times, you'll see that the rate limiting policy has been applied, and the error message should match what you had entered earlier when you were editing the rate limiting policy. So in just a few steps, you've seen how easy it is to prevent server overload and ensure the quality of your API. I'll give a few moments for everyone to catch up, see if there are any questions. Okay. If no questions, we're going to move on to the last step of the lab, where we're going to look at data masking and see how we can protect sensitive information. To do so, go back to the API gateway, and we're going to go to edit mode. And for this one, make sure you're on get single. And we're going to go to response processing and add data masking. Make sure it's response processing that you're editing the policy for. For here, we're going to enter the application that we created earlier. So refer to your notepad for that application name and add your application. We're going to scroll down to JSON path and add 2 masking criteria. For the first one, you will copy and paste on page 24 of the lab guide, $, ... billing posted code. Make sure you don't have any spaces before and after the text. And the masking type is going to be mask. Mask value, just add some asterisks. and we're going to click Add. For the second masking criteria, you're going to copy and paste the phrase on page 25 of the lab guide, $... billing street. And the masking type for this is going to be filter.
So the idea here is maybe you have end users, and that's one we're associating this with an application. Maybe you have specific end users of an API, a team that you want to see everything, kind of admins, if you will. You may have a different team that you want to limit, like maybe you don't want them to see certain fields at all, or maybe they can see the fields, but you don't want them to see the data. And you can control that with this masking approach. You'll notice here that we're using kind of a JSON format for the path of the different elements we want to mask or filter. But if you are working with a SOAP-based API, you'd use XPath, which is a little further up right there. You can use that approach, or anything that's returning an XML. That's where you use XPath. JSON is going to be if you're returning a JSON, which tends to be REST APIs from that standpoint. Or ultimately, too, you can use regex approach to find specific elements and say those are the ones you want to mask or limit if you don't want to use either the JSON or the XPath approach.
So make sure you have all of the elements. You've added 2 masking criteria under JSON path, which is going to be $... billing postal code. Copying and pasting that is correctly is important for later on when we're testing it in the developer portal. So just refer to page 24 and 25 of the lab guide. Once you have that, we're going to click Save. And we're going to go to developer portal. Here, we're going to update some customer information first, and then we'll test how the data masking policy applies. Okay, so to do so, we are going to click on Update and go to Request Body. And here you can see we can enter some information for the customer. Can be arbitrary for this. So city, just enter a city and then use the country abbreviation and state abbreviation.
You can see how important this is, having this element that we did early on, putting these pieces in here that make it very clear for an end user what's expected to be put in these values here as well. So this is a good kind of documentation for end users that you can do.
For the ID, refer to your notepad for that Salesforce ID that was returned when you created the customer. Once you've updated these information, we're going to click Send, and you should get a success. So now we're going to query by name and go to the Get Resource. In the Authorization tab, we're going to use Basic Auth, and we're going to use the username and password that you used to enter to the tenant. Update. Once you've updated your basic auth, we're going to parameters, and we will copy and paste our customer name and click Send. So we've applied the data masking correctly. Then we can see that the billing postal code is asterized and you don't see billing street. If you still see billing postal code or billing street, just double check that in your response processing data masking policy, you've selected the correct scope, which is get single and you've added the correct query expressions. And in just a few steps, we protected sensitive information in the API. And so I want to congratulate everyone for following along in these steps in the lab. If you have any questions, feel free to send them now. We have time for that. In the lab guide, there is an extra exercise, and it's on API mocking. And this is where if your API is still under development, you can use that function to test your API still. So I want to see if, for those who have finished, just send an emoji or something so we can see who has finished. Great job. And if you still have any questions, feel free to send them over, and we'll make sure to address them all.
And again, just to reiterate, you're going to get a copy of this recording. If you weren't able to finish, or you want to make sure that you did it the right way and go back through, you can feel free to do that. You're going to have access to this tenant for the next 30 days. So you can kind of work with it and try some different variations if you want. I think doing the mock API approach, the next use case that's also on the guide, is a really good practice as well. Thanks, Jale. I appreciate all your work on this.
Yeah. Thanks, Scott, and thanks everyone else for your participation. We've successfully used this customer API and saw how the IBM webMethods API Gateway can protect the API and how it can be made accessible to consumers in the developer portal. So hopefully you guys found this useful, and pass it over to Scott for some last notes.
Right. So thanks a lot, Jale. So what I want to do is just a little quick wrap up, and then I'm going to hand it over to Emma again, and she's got some kind of housekeeping items there at the end. So on what I want to do here first is just talk about some resources that are available to you. We have our IBM webMethods Tech Exchange community. Feel free to sign up for that and join that. You can see different presentations, information. You can ask questions of other users and people along those lines. One of the things too, and let me kind of get through this, but we did normally talk about end-to-end monitoring. So Jale, let me just get through this slide here and the next one, and I'm going to let you go back to that. And because I know we tend to use the end-to-end monitoring as well. So anyway, this is a good point. This will be in the slides that you have. You can go and join Tech Exchange here. We also have some other steps that you can take moving forward. There's an upcoming webinar on November 15th in terms of AI and cybersecurity. You can also book one-on-one demos, and you can sign up for webMethods updates. Let me stop sharing for a moment, and I want to give Jale a chance to go back and show that end-to-end monitoring that we do have within the platform. Go ahead.
Okay, give me one moment.
So basically, as she's setting this up, you can monitor an API at the individual level when you're in the gateway. There are places there where you can look at analytics and tracer there. That's like if you're doing debugging and you're in this mode that you just saw right there just a moment ago, there's a place where you can analyze that specific, as you're testing it and working with it. And you can also trace and debug any issues. But we also have our end-to-end monitoring, which Jale is showing you right here.
Yep. So you can, this is where you can see a single view of the transactions that are happening across all of the products that you are using, API gateway, B2B, integration, and click on each of these to see exactly what's going on. And this is going to just trace all of the business transactions and allow you to see a complete flow of real-time. Yeah.
So just keep in mind too, with all of our aspects of the platform, whether it be just the gateway, developer portal, integrations, you can see all of that activity through one single pane.
And if you want to look at it, oh yeah.
Go ahead.
And of course, if you want to look at it at the individual level of each of the products, you can do that as well through the dashboards and gain insight from there. Yep. And in the guide, I've shown you how to navigate through those as well.
All right. So I think that's pretty much it for us. We talked about the tech exchange and some of the upcoming next steps. I'm going to take the opportunity to turn it over to Emma for some final housekeeping. And thanks everybody for your time and participation. I appreciate your patience with the issues we had on the front end.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Jale. Thank you guys for a great hands-on lab, and thank you everybody for all of your engagement. You guys have been doing great. I am going to put the next step slide back up just in case anybody wanted to join any of this or take any next steps and didn't get a chance for that QR code. So that's on the screen. Feel free to take any of those next actions. And then I also wanted to point out, I think a survey should have launched. It should be in the right-hand side of your engagement panel. If you don't mind taking 30 seconds or a minute to fill that out, it will help us improve our content in the future. And lastly, we will stay on. We'll hang back for a little bit. So if you have any questions, feel free to put it in the chat or the Q&A. We won't be on the stage, but we'll be back. We'll be backstage and we can help you out. I will also be sending out an email to all of you that contains the recording and all the materials as mentioned. You have access to the platform for 30 days, so keep an eye out for that. And please reach out to any of us if you have any questions as you're getting to explore the platform on your own. We've got a large team here who's very willing and wanting to help you guys succeed with the platform. So don't be hesitant to reach out to us if there's anything we can do to help. And thank you all again.
Let me just answer a question real quick. It was asked about versions or specifics. So keep in mind, this is cloud-based. It's an iPaaS platform. So everybody who's using it is all on the same version. So unlike the on-premise, like for currently our on-prem version, most recent one is 10.15, I believe. There is a 11 version, but it's basically for new customers, it's roughly the same as 10.15 that is being offered as we've been acquired by IBM. So there's a little variation there, but that's for on-premise type of approach. With the cloud approach, everybody's on the same thing. And we do updates, like major updates once a year, minor updates probably every quarter roughly. Those are backward compatible. So if you've developed something and then you get an update, it automatically will update that for you. Everything should work fine. If you have a concern about that, you can get access and have one of your environments updated a couple weeks early so that you can test things and make sure everything's going to work right. But it's intended to be 100% backward compatible to anything you previously built. And you don't have to worry about upgrades at all anymore. It just automatically will happen for you. Hopefully that answered your question.